Welcome back. You're listening to Get Real with Bob and Stacey, and you're joining us for our Leaders and Legends segment. Our guest today is Pam O'Connor, President and CEO of the leading real estate companies of the world. Welcome to the show, Pam.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So I want to give everybody an overview of who Pam is. For over 25 years, Pam has managed networks, which ultimately were consolidated into leading real estate companies of the world, and was the first woman to head a major real estate network. Pam has been named one of the top 25 thought leaders by the National Association of Realtors, as well as one of the top 100 most influential people in real estate by Inman News. She was also ranked 29th on the Swampole Power 200, a ranking of the most powerful people in real estate. So excited to have you, Pam. First, can you tell us a little bit about what leading real estate companies of the world is?
Sure. I guess the simplest way to describe us is as sort of an unfranchised in the residential business. So we are a network of about 550 real estate brokerage companies in over 55 countries, and our clientele, our members, are independent real estate companies. So they really want all of the resources and tools and connections of a franchise, but they don't necessarily want to use someone else's name. They want to build, or they already have very good local brands, and they want to continue to build those. So we provide a lot of the same, technology, marketing, learning, all of those kinds of resources to those companies, and have really evolved over the years. We also have a very strong luxury division, luxury portfolio, which is for the $1 million and up market as well.
That's cool. So how many agents or brokerages are within your network?
550 companies and about 130,000 agents. That's around 4,000 offices. So we're in, I think I mentioned, 55 countries. And last year our brokerages did a total of over $350 billion in sales volume. So it's we're really the largest network out there, even larger than most of the franchises. So it's
wow.
But we're a little under the radar because the brands in our world are more the local brands that represent us.
That's awesome. So I take it you know a little bit about real estate. So
a little bit.
What factors are impacting the real estate market now, do you think?
Well, I think one of the things out there is really low interest rates, and with everything else going on in the world, I don't know that consumers are hearing as much about that, but they are down. I think in somewhat in the expectation of the potential Brexit vote. I think that was what was driving it initially. The Fed was uncomfortable raising rates when all of that, international turmoil might be anticipated. So they're low right now, and people really need to be taking advantage of those because, who knows how long they'll be there. So that's, I think, a big factor. Inventory's been very low for some time. There are not a lot of houses for sale, so unfortunately it's frustrating for buyers because they have to, many times they're in multiple bid situations. But our hope is maybe with this interest rate situation, more sellers may realize now is a good time to put their homes on the market because they can trade up and not be at as much of a disadvantage. So there's, I think the low interest rates, low inventory are both factors, and there's obviously always, the external concerns, what's going to happen with the election, all of these terrible terrorism situations that we're seeing. The overall economy, so all of that plays into it. And it's interesting, we hear so much about the millennials, but they are, slower to buy homes than probably any generation so far. So we're still seeing most of the activity from the Gen Xers and the over 50. And, one of the things we lose sight of is that 75% of the consumer spend in this country is done by people over 50. So we can't overlook those people because those are the folks, in most cases, who are the ones buying homes.
Wow, I just wrote that down.
75%. I did not realize that. The millennials are obviously the generation we all have to worry about because they're a huge, population, and they're going to be more and more, prevalent in that statistic. But for now, I read something that I think this is kind of funny. People 75 to dead buy more cars than people 18 to 24.
That's
no way.
Crazy.
Really?
So, Yeah. So, I mean, there's a guy named Bob Hoffman, an advertising guru, who's written books about this. His whole point, he kind of debunks the way marketers approach a lot of this today, because they kind of lose sight of who's out there spending the money,
Well, yeah, you see, TV shows get canceled all the time because the only demographic they appealed to was, over 60 years old. But it sounds like that's where all the money is anyways.
Yeah. He wrote a book called, what is it? Marketers are from Mars and consumers are from New Jersey. So. Yeah.
That's awesome. So, I'll say we see it a lot in the Boston market, a ton of international buyers. Specifically, we see a lot of people coming from China. What influence do you see of international buyers and cross-border real estate across, say, the United States?
Yeah, I really do think it's huge, Stacey. I think it's, we're still in the earlier stages of that, but I hear people from Middle America saying, oh, well, they're never going to come here. Well, that's not even right, because you mentioned Chinese buyers. I mean, they're probably the middle-class Chinese, well, all classes of Chinese are very, very focused on educating their children abroad. So whether it's to the U.S. or the U.K. or Australia, but they're buying homes as investments for those kids when they're going to school here. So we're seeing that in Bloomington, Indiana, and Peoria, Illinois, and, all kinds of places you wouldn't expect. Obviously more in the coastal cities, the San Franciscos, the Vancouvers, and all of that, the New Yorks. But I think that's going to continue. In addition, not just the Chinese, but even with what's happening over in Europe with the European Union and Britain and all of that, right now the dollar is very strong, as you know, and so that's a disincentive for some of those folks to buy here. That the international purchases this year are down from a lot of the Latin Americans and the Europeans because of that. But the people from China and the Middle East, and not just China, but there's a huge population in other parts of Asia, the Philippines, the Indonesia, a lot of the Malaysia, a lot of those companies, the Thailands, the Vietnams, all of those. So for those folks, most of them are working on the dollar basis, so they don't have that issue. So I think that is we're going to continue to see that kind of investment. But the biggest thing about it is that the U.S. is still perceived as a safe haven, for people with all of the turmoil around the world. So I think there's going to be more and more of that. And even if I always say buyers come from, real estate is local, but buyers can come from anywhere. And even no matter where you are, I think there should be some awareness that if you're selling your home, that you want a company that can help you provide some of that global exposure, because you just never know who might have an interest in it.
Now, what do you see for trends? We talk a lot about the trends of foreigners buying here, but what about citizens from the U.S. Or even North America, including Canada? Where do you see those people potentially buying outside of their own countries? Like, are there a lot of buying in Latin America or Europe or anything?
Yeah, it's all over. We on our luxury portfolio site, we do have some analytics where we actually can track who's looking at what listings from where and wherever it is in the world. So if we're looking at a listing in Mauritius, which is off the coast of South Africa, we can see, did people from the U.S. look at that or from wherever countries? There's less, I think, from the U.S. out, but we are seeing an increase in that, and sometimes it's a matter of vacation, second homes for the luxury buyer. I think right now, frankly, Britain's going to be in a good position for that, because London and really all of the UK has been pretty much priced out of the market for a lot of folks. So, because it's just been so expensive, and with the pound and what's happening there, I think there could be a little surge on that front. And I actually was talking to our London member the other day, and she said they're seeing that. She said we're actually selling some homes to people that are seeing London as being on sale right now because of the decline in the pound. So. And we see the kinds of referrals that we see from our real estate companies with clients going abroad. Sometimes it's listing referrals where somebody here has a grandparent in Italy who's got, a home, they passed away, and the estate is trying to sell the home. Sometimes it's that, sometimes it is second homes. And then, there's a different type of buyer too, the expats who are being transferred abroad, and we have a separate relocation company that deals with that as well, and that's all very global and a lot more of. There was a reluctance in years past for a lot of, U.S. citizens to work abroad because they kind of got lost and forgotten over there, and it was hard to get back on a career track if they came back to the States. But that's not true anymore because all of these multinational companies really need employees that have great experience, living and working abroad.
So I recently read a book called The End of the Suburbs, and basically what the idea of the book is that the millennials, people coming up the ranks as home buyers, are less interested in living in suburbia and they're moving towards cities. What are you seeing with today's buyers? Do you think that many of them are going for cities, or what kind of trends are you seeing in the market?
Well, I think to some extent that's true, but what they're really looking for is accessibility. The younger folks don't, they're not workaholics like their parents, and they don't want to be tied to their job and have an hour and a half long commute each way and that sort of thing. So for that reason, a lot of them are looking more, closer in, urban. They're not as concerned about huge spaces and that kind of thing. But what's interesting is, in a lot of areas, there are suburban downtowns almost. There are a lot of these little, like when you take any, like a Chicago or New York, or Boston, you've got people on the transportation lines. And a lot of those little suburban towns actually are, they have little business centers, and there are some opportunities for folks to live there. So I think some of it's a maturity cycle, and as people have children and all of that, they want sort of both. They still want that lifestyle where they're not commuting long distances, but I think we'll see maybe more of an upsurge as some of these, suburban towns, if you will, that have, business centers. The other interesting thing is there are, these big houses out there, McMansions and older estates in beautiful areas like Westchester County, and I'm sure suburban Boston has a lot of those, where you think, who's going to buy these houses because they're sort of white elephants. People don't want them now. But somebody made an interesting comment to me the other day, which I thought made a lot of sense, and that is that you've got, especially Asian families and Hispanic cultures are very much, they live multi-generationally, so they'll have maybe sometimes 4 generations in the same household, the great-grandma, the grandparents, the parents, and the kids. And so I think we're going to see more of some of those houses being bought by a whole different audience that we haven't thought about, which really begs the question, what are we doing in the real estate business to make sure that we're mirroring the people that, with our agents, the consumers that we want to serve going forward. So I'm not convinced that the suburbs are going to go away, but I agree with you that the cities are hot right now, and there's a lot of interest in living downtown. Even with boomers, it's not, I have friends in Chicago that live in the suburbs, but more and more, because it's more affordable than New York, they're buying a little weekend place, a little studio or one bedroom where they can come into the city on the weekends. And I do think we're going to see that, and I think the suburbs are going to have to really adjust and offer more of those features if they're going to survive and do well. But some people have to live somewhere, and they can't all fit downtown.
Right. So I have a question. I know it's a little bit off topic, but you're dealing with some of the best real estate agents in the country. And one dynamic I've learned just at my own company is, interestingly, as far as training goes, we're constantly pushing on agents the importance of social media, and you need to be on Facebook and Instagram, Snapchat, there's a million different places. Interestingly, though, if I take, for example, my top 15 real estate agents, many of them are the weakest on social media, yet they're the highest producing salespeople. What do you, what qualities do you think make a big difference in a real estate agent building their business?
Well, I do think social media is huge, but I have a different take on it. I don't think it's huge. I don't think, I hate to use the word vomiting your listings and everything out there on social media. I don't think that necessarily is the answer. What I believe is being a stalker, if you will. In other words, having your sphere of influence, being friends with them on Facebook, being with them on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and following them, and just quietly seeing what's up with them, what's happening with them, and that really helps you. When you're following up with people, you can have a real conversation with them. Gee, I just saw your daughter graduate from college. You have to be really proud of that, and it's not a how you doing? Are you ready to sell your house kind of a conversation. It's a way to really stay in touch with your sphere, sort of passively, behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean you have to be, posting all the time. Although the other side of that is I happen to think that people want to work with people that are passionate about what they do and really want to serve them. So if I were an agent out there, I don't necessarily think you divide your professional group from your personal group, because they sort of morph into each other, and your friends become a lot of your clients and that kind of thing. So I think posting more about just what you're doing. I just went to a great street fair this weekend. If you haven't thought about this neighborhood, you really ought to look at it, or something. Just things that tie you to what you do, but in a more subtle way. So I do think there's value there. The big thing today with agents is we have to know more than the customer, and the customer's got access to a lot of information. And I always say the old expression. I didn't come up with this, but I love it. Which is, information is free, but knowledge is priceless. And I'm a firm believer that the consumer thinks they have access to everything and they know everything, but they need those good agents who can interpret that information for them and analyze it and really give them perspective on what it means, not just here's the data, but what does that data really mean? So I think agents have to really continue educating themselves, not just on the market, but what's happening and, what are some of the tools and resources out there that can help consumers. I think they have to be lifelong learners. In a lot of respects, it's still very much a people business, and technology is very useful in being more productive and efficient, and providing some bells and whistles that can be really appealing to consumers. But at the end of the day, it's how much they trust you to, understand what their needs are and really help them get from A to Z. There was a post recently that I read that brokerages were going away because they didn't really add value anymore, and I'm going, where do I even start with this?
Right.
I laugh. I've been in this business.
We're actually starting to run out of time. We're coming to the end of our segment. That was all awesome information. We really appreciate you joining us on the show today, Pam.
Thank you so much. It was really a pleasure. Appreciate both of you asking me, Bob and Stacey. Thanks.
You're welcome. That's all for this edition of Get Real. We'll be back again next weekend with more.